Michael had been living on the streets for years, keeping to himself until the day he saw a group of kids ganging up on a scared boy in the park. Instinct kicked in, and Michael stepped in to protect him, sending the bullies running. The boy thanked him, but what happened next left Michael frozen in disbelief. Familiar faces appeared, revealing a connection he never saw coming. Morning light filters through the urban canopy of Jefferson Park as Michael Wilson performs his daily reconnaissance. 53 years old, with the weathered face of a man who's seen too much, he moves with the disciplined efficiency of someone who once wore a uniform with pride. His eyes scan the immaculate lawn, identifying optimal collection points where careless visitors discard aluminum. Small treasures worth 6 cents apiece in his ongoing mission for survival. Civilians pass without acknowledgement, their gazes sliding past him like water over stone. Michael has become a tactical ghost in this urban environment, his camouflage. Not desert tan but layers of mismatched clothes and 3 days of silver stubble. His possessions are contained in a standard-issue backpack, modified with extra straps and waterproofing techniques learned during his third deployment to Fallujah. The park bench serves as his forward operating base from 0600 to 1900 hours, strategically positioned to provide maximum situational awareness while remaining outside the patrol routes of local law enforcement. Michael settles into position, his movements deliberate, minimizing unnecessary energy expenditure. Conservation of resources, a tactical necessity he'd mastered long before homelessness, made it essential. Morning briefing, he mutters to himself, a ritual maintained from his days as Staff Sergeant Wilson, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. His right hand unconsciously touches the faded USMC tattoo visible beneath his frayed sleeve. The eagle, globe, and anchor partially obscured by a scar that tells its own story of shrapnel and hasty field medicine. The park begins its morning activation sequence. Joggers establish perimeter patrol routes. Office workers create a surge of transient presence between 0745 and 0830. Maintenance personnel, potential friendlies who occasionally provide intel on upcoming park events, begin their systematic coverage of the grounds. Michael's stomach signals 0900 with practiced precision. He reaches into his pack, extracting a carefully wrapped half sandwich salvaged from the deli dumpster on 7th Street. Standard operating procedure: assess for contamination, consume efficiently, maintain hydration with water from the park fountain. That produces the coldest, cleanest supply. A sharp memory intrusion. Captain Reynolds passing out MREs after 3 days pinned down outside Ramadi. The taste of preserved turkey and the laughter of Marines trying to trade desserts. The mental shrapnel finds its mark, and Michael's hand trembles momentarily before tactical discipline reasserts control. Maintain the perimeter, he whispers, forcing himself back to the present. His eyes track a police cruiser making it scheduled pass along the park's north side. Officer Ramirez, identified by his gait and patrol pattern. Not a direct threat, but situational awareness demands monitoring. Michael adjusts his position, reducing visibility while maintaining observation capability. Collection mission begins at 1100 hours. Michael moves through pre-planned search patterns, his experienced eyes identifying aluminum resources with practiced efficiency. Each can represents approximately 1/18 of a meal at the downtown shelter, provided he arrives before capacity is reached. His tactical analysis suggests a 68% success probability today, based on historical patterns and current weather conditions. By 1500 hours, Michael has secured 17 cans in his retrofitted plastic collection system. Tactical outcome: below optimal, but sufficient for necessary resource acquisition. He returns to his FOB, calculations running through mission-trained synapses. 3 more days until VA check arrives. 4 potential shelters within operational range. 2 meals secured at the Methodist outreach yesterday. The afternoon park, Demographic shifts as schools release their populations. Michael's situational awareness heightens. Younger park users present both increased risk of negative engagement and occasionally strategic opportunities for discarded food resources. A group of mothers eye him warily, adjusting their trajectory to maintain maximum distance. Michael records this without emotion. Tactical reality of his current status. Threat designation based solely on appearance. Parameters beyond his control. He was invisible in different ways now than when he wore camouflage in combat zones. Then, invisibility was a tactical advantage. Now it was a sentence. A state of existence where human connection had been strategically eliminated from his operational parameters. Michael Wilson, once staff sergeant, decorated combat veteran with 3 tours and a Silver Star, sits motionless as the afternoon light shifts through Jefferson Park. His eyes maintain their disciplined scan of the perimeter. The mission continues. Survival is the only acceptable outcome. Every day at 3:15, a quiet boy would arrive at Jefferson Park, his small frame weighed down by a backpack that seemed too large for his shoulders. Michael noticed him first on a Tuesday when the autumn leaves had just begun to fall. The boy couldn't have been more than 10 years old, with dark curly hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. Michael watched from his usual bench as the child carefully selected a spot beneath the old oak tree, far from the playground where other children shouted and played. There was something methodical about the boy's routine that resonated with Michael. Military habits die hard, and he recognized a fellow creature of pattern. The boy would arrive, unzip his backpack, remove a worn paperback book, and read silently for exactly 2 hours before packing up and walking toward the east exit of the park. Never the playground. Never with friends. Always alone. By the 3rd week of observation, Michael had cataloged the boy's collection of books, mostly science fiction and adventure stories judging by the covers. The kind of stories Michael himself had devoured at that age, before deployment. Papers and desert sand, and the constant ringing in his left ear that medication had never fully silenced. "You're watching him again," said Gloria, an elderly woman who fed the pigeons every afternoon. One of the few park regulars who acknowledged Michael's existence. Michael shifted uncomfortably on his bench, pulling his worn jacket tighter despite the mild weather. "Just making sure he's safe. Kid that young shouldn't be alone so long. His mother works at that cleaning service over on Madison. Double shifts most days." Gloria tossed another handful of breadcrumbs. "Name's Elijah. Smart boy." "Too smart." "Maybe. That's always hard in school." Michael nodded, understanding immediately. He'd been that boy once, the one with his nose in a book while others played football. Before he'd learned that physical strength could be a different kind of armor. On the 23rd day, something changed. Elijah arrived at his usual time but seemed distracted. His movements lacked their usual precision as he repeatedly glanced toward the park entrance. He opened his book but stared at the same page for almost 30 minutes, his eyes never moving across the text. Michael straightened slightly, his senses sharpening. Years of combat had taught him to recognize the tension before an ambush. The boy was waiting for something, or avoiding something. The answer came at 4:05, when Elijah suddenly packed his book and stood, his small body radiating anxiety. 3 older boys had entered the park, maybe 13 or 14 years old, moving with the artificial swagger of youth, trying to appear dangerous. They hadn't spotted Elijah yet, but the boy clearly recognized them, his escape now urgent. Michael remained still, his presence unremarkable among the park's fixtures. Years of homelessness had perfected his ability to be invisible when necessary. But his eyes tracked Elijah's retreat, noting how the boy's shoulders hunched forward, how his head dipped low. The universal body language of someone accustomed to being targeted. The older boys continued their patrol of the park, obviously searching for someone. They left after 20 minutes, and Michael exhaled slowly, tension releasing from his shoulders. Not today, at least not the following afternoon. Elijah arrived 10 minutes later than usual. Michael noticed a new caution in the boy's approach, the way his eyes scanned the park before committing to his spot under the oak. Once settled, he pulled out his book The Hobbit, but his usual concentration was fractured by constant vigilance. Fourth day of this new pattern, something unexpected happened. As Elijah packed up to leave, his gaze deliberately sought out Michael's bench. For a brief moment, their eyes met, the homeless veteran and the solitary child, before Elijah quickly looked away. But in that momentary connection, Michael recognized something that made his chest tighten, the silent acknowledgement between two invisible people. Neither spoke. Neither approached the other, but something had changed. Michael found himself arriving at the park 15 minutes earlier the next day, his usual spot providing clear sightlines to all park entrances. He told himself it was just habit, the old military instincts demanding awareness of his surroundings. But when Elijah arrived and settled beneath the oak, Michael felt a strange sense of relief. The boy was safe. For now. As weeks passed, their silent ritual continued. Elijah would occasionally glance toward Michael's bench, sometimes offering the barest hint of a nod. Michael would respond with an equally subtle acknowledgement. Two solitary figures sharing space, without demands or expectations. Perhaps the only kind of connection Michael could still manage after everything he'd seen and done. Neither could have predicted how dramatically this fragile connection would change both their lives when the inevitable finally happened. When the three older boys finally cornered their prey, and the invisible man chose to be seen, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jefferson Park as Michael observed the scene from his usual bench, peripheral vision tracking movement without drawing attention. Years of urban survival had taught him the value of situational awareness. Three older boys, maybe 13 to 14 years old, entered from the east entrance, their body language triggering long dormant alarm systems in Michael's mind. Predatory. Confident. Hunting. Elijah sat alone by the fountain, backpack open beside him, math textbook balanced on his knees, completely unaware of the approaching threat. Michael's muscles tensed involuntarily, combat instincts from another lifetime, assessing distances, angles, potential routes of escape. 20 years removed from active duty, but some things never fade. Hey, bookworm. The tallest boy's voice carried across the empty playground. Elijah's head snapped up, his body instantly rigid with recognition. Not their first encounter, Michael realized, watching the boy's face transform from concentration to fear in 0.5 seconds. Threat assessment: 3 aggressors, 1 target, 0 witnesses beyond himself. Michael remained motionless, conditioned by years on the street to avoid drawing attention. Homeless meant invisible until you weren't, and weren't usually meant trouble. He pulled his worn jacket tighter, gaze fixed on a distant tree while tracking the confrontation through practiced peripheral vision. What's your reading today, genius? The second boy snatched the textbook, holding it overhead while Elijah reached futilely. Advanced math? Think you're better than everybody else, huh? Please give it back. Elijah's voice barely audible. Tactical mistake showing weakness to predators. The third boy circled behind, executing a flanking maneuver that Michael recognized immediately. Classic group intimidation tactics. Surround the target, cut off escape. Roots: establish dominance through superior positioning. Maybe we should help you study. The leader grabbed Elijah's backpack, appending its contents across the concrete. Notebooks, pencils, a lunch container, all scattered with calculated precision. Psychological warfare aimed at maximum humiliation. Michael's breathing slowed, an unconscious preparation response. Still observing, still invisible. Not his problem, not his fight. Street survival rule number 1: don't get involved. My mom just bought those folders. Elijah's voice cracked as he knelt to gather his belongings. The tallest boy's boot came down on a notebook. deliberately grinding dirt into the pages. Oops, clumsy me. Michael's hand tightened around his coffee cup, crushing the paper slightly. Second warning sign ignored. Leave me alone. I didn't do anything to you. Elijah reached for his backpack, but the leader shoved him hard, sending the boy sprawling backward onto the concrete. Contact. First physical escalation. What are you gonna do about it? Cry to your mommy? The leader laughed, high-fiving his associates as Elijah's eyes welled with tears. Michael saw the exact moment the boy's spirit broke, a look he'd witnessed on other battlefields. His decision came not as a conscious choice, but as automatic as breathing. Combat mode engaged. He stood, shedding his invisibility like an old coat, and moved with surprising speed for a man of 52. 20 feet covered in 6 seconds, positioning himself between the fallen boy and his attackers. His stance shifted automatically, feet shoulder-width apart, center of gravity low, hands relaxed at his sides. Ready. That's enough. His voice emerged rough from disuse, but carrying the unmistakable command tone that once directed men through combat zones. Not shouting, not threatening, simply stating a fact with absolute certainty. The boys froze, startled by his sudden materialization. Michael maintained eye contact with the leader, cataloging details automatically. Brown hair, blue jacket, skull design on t-shirt, overcompensating swagger masking insecurity. Mind your own business, old man. The leader recovered, attempting to reassert dominance, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. Michael remained motionless, letting his presence do the work. He is my business now. 4 words, delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far worse than teenage intimidation. Michael didn't blink, didn't shift, simply existed. As an immovable object between predator and prey, the tallest bully's fist froze midair, as Michael's weathered hand locked around his wrist, applying just enough pressure to immobilize without causing injury. Combat training from 15 years ago activated through muscle memory that had survived countless nights on cold concrete. The boy's eyes widened, fear replacing arrogance as he realized the homeless man he'd ignored daily was now standing between him and his target. That's enough, Michael stated, his voice carrying the calm authority that once commanded men in Fallujah. His posture shifted subtly, stance widening, center of gravity lowering, positioning for control rather than confrontation. The 3 bullies, momentarily stunned by the intervention, recovered quickly, the leader attempting to jerk his arm free. Let go of me, you stink. The boy spat, his bravado returning despite the firm grip on his wrist. Michael assessed the situation with tactical precision, cataloging the positions of all 3 antagonists, identifying the leader, noting the escape routes, keeping Elijah's safety as the primary objective. You don't want to continue this, Michael said, releasing the wrist with a subtle push that created distance without escalation. His eyes, clear despite his disheveled appearance, carried a weight the boys had never encountered, the steady gaze of someone who had seen true violence and stood firm. The second bully, taller but thinner, stepped forward, mouth opening for what would surely be another insult. But something in Michael's quiet stance made him hesitate. The third boy, already backing away, tugged at his friend's sleeve. Come on, Jake, let's go. That guy's crazy. Michael maintained his position, body angled to protect Elijah, who remained on the ground behind him, backpack contents scattered across the pathway. The leader, Jake, rubbed his wrist, glaring at Michael with a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Whatever. Not worth our time anyway. Jake kicked Elijah's math textbook, sending it skidding across the concrete in a final display. OF dominance before retreating. Hanging out with homeless freaks now, Eli. That's perfect. Michael remained still until the boys were 30 yards away, monitoring their departure with the practiced vigilance of someone who had conducted countless security assessments. Only when they rounded the corner by the park entrance did he turn. his attention to Elijah. "You okay, kid?" he asked, kneeling down to help gather the scattered school supplies. His movements were efficient, hands steady despite not having eaten since yesterday morning. Elijah nodded, eyes wide as he studied Michael with a new perspective. "Yeah," he managed, accepting his science folder. "Thank you." Michael handed him a slightly scuffed calculator, their fingers briefly connecting in the exchange. "They've done this before. Not a question. Tactical assessment based on observed behavior patterns. Every Tuesday and Thursday," Elijah confirmed, zipping his backpack. With shaking hands. "That's when my mom works late." Michael nodded, understanding the tactical significance of this information. Predators identified vulnerable timeframes, established patterns of operation. Basic infantry knowledge applied to suburban warfare. "I'm Michael," he offered, standing up and automatically scanning the surroundings. Civilian parents had appeared on the path, watching their interaction with visible concern. Michael recognized the threat assessment in their expressions. A homeless man talking to a child triggered immediate security protocols in any responsible adult. "I'm Elijah," the boy replied, shouldering his backpack. A faint smile appeared, transforming his face. "You were like a superhero or something." Michael shook his head, already retreating toward his usual bench. "Just didn't like the odds. 3 against 1 isn't fair." "Will they come back?" Concern crept into Elijah's voice. "Probably." Michael's tactical assessment was automatic. "But they'll think twice now." He nodded toward the approaching parents. "Your folks?" "No, my mom's working." Elijah glanced at the onlookers. "I should go. She doesn't get home until 7. Michael maintained operational security, stepping back further, creating distance that would reassure the watching adults. "Be careful heading home," he advised, slipping his hands into his pockets, hunching his shoulders, making himself smaller, less threatening. Returning to invisibility, Elijah nodded, hesitated, then voiced what Michael already knew from years of tactical awareness. "They're going to be really mad tomorrow." "I'll be around," Michael assured him, already fading back to his observation post beneath the oak tree. The boy smiled again. This unexpected alliance providing security where none had existed before. As Elijah walked away, Michael contemplated the unexpected breach in his carefully maintained isolation protocols. Involvement meant visibility. Visibility meant attention. Attention meant questions. Questions meant problems. And yet, watching the boy's now straight shoulders as he navigated the park path, Michael couldn't bring himself to regret the intervention. Some tactical decisions transcended standard operating procedures. Some battles needed fighting, regardless of personal risk assessments. 11 hours after the confrontation, the park's morning silence broke with the steady crunch of approaching footsteps. Michael tensed automatically, years of situational awareness triggering his defensive instincts. He maintained his position beneath the oak tree, seemingly absorbed in adjusting the tattered sleeping bag that served as his only barrier against the elements. Through peripheral vision, a tactical habit never lost from his combat days, he tracked the small figure navigating the winding path toward his position. "You came back," Michael observed quietly as Elijah stopped precisely 7 feet from his makeshift camp. The boy's backpack hung heavy on his narrow shoulders, different from yesterday's. This one intact, without the torn strap the bullies had damaged. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," Elijah admitted, his voice barely carrying on the morning breeze. "She works double shifts on Wednesdays. Breakfast and lunch shift at the diner, then evening office cleaning until 9. Michael nodded, processing this tactical intelligence with practiced neutrality. Single parent, extended absence, minimal supervision. The vulnerability assessment formed automatically in his mind. 8 years homeless hadn't erased 15 years of threat evaluation protocols. "You shouldn't be talking to strangers," Michael stated. maintaining eye contact briefly before scanning the perimeter. Habit: always checking exit routes, possible approach vectors, situational threats. You're not a stranger, you helped me. Elijah's contradiction came with unexpected confidence as he lowered himself to the grass, maintaining that 7-foot safety buffer that indicated caution balanced with trust. I brought something. The boy unzipped his backpack with deliberate care, extracting a paper bag with precision that reminded Michael of how EOD specialists handled suspicious packages. Inside, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, an apple, a juice box, standard issue school lunch, carefully divided in half. Tactical resource sharing, Michael commented with the ghost of a smile, the professional terminology slipping out before he could filter it. Elijah's eyebrows lifted. What's that mean? Means you're giving away half your supplies, Michael translated, hesitating before accepting the offered food. The last person who'd shared resources with him had been Martinez, his spotter in Kandahar. 3 tours together. Before an IED took Martinez and left Michael with the invisible wounds that eventually claimed everything else. The sandwich was peanut butter and jelly, the strawberry kind. Michael ate methodically, portioning each bite, a habit formed from years of making meager resources last. Opposite him, Elijah mirrored the behavior, watching with studied intensity. They've been after me since October, Elijah volunteered suddenly. Started when Mom couldn't afford the new Jordan shoes everyone was getting. Then got worse when Ms. Trent made a big deal about my book report. Attention made you a target, Michael assessed, recognizing the pattern. In his unit, the exceptional performers sometimes do the hardest assignments, the most dangerous missions. Excellence created visibility. Visibility created vulnerability. Elijah nodded, surprised at being understood so completely. They take my stuff, push me around. Call me professor, because I like to read. Michael observed the boy's clothing. Jeans 2 sizes too large, secured with a belt punched with extra holes, a sweatshirt washed so many times the school logo had nearly vanished. Shoes with the telltale signs of duct tape reinforcement hidden inside. Your mom's doing her best, Michael stated, not a question. Dad died when I was 6. Car accident. Mom says we're just in a tough spot until she can finish her online classes. The information emerged in tactical bursts, each revelation calculated, testing Michael's response. The veteran recognized the approach, building a connection through controlled disclosure. He'd done the same with potential local assets in hostile territory. The oldest bully, Michael redirected, red backpack, scar on his chin. He stands differently than the others. Jake, Elijah confirmed. His dad's the high school football coach. Everyone's scared of him. Standard hierarchical intimidation structure, Michael thought. Leadership leveraging external authority connections to maintain dominance. They'll be back, he warned, tactical assessment automatic. I know, Elijah acknowledged with a resigned veteran's acceptance that looked wrong on a 10-year-old's face. But now I know someone sees me. The simple statement hit Michael with unexpected force. Someone sees me. How long had it been since anyone truly saw him? Registered his existence as something more than an uncomfortable urban fixture to avoid. Eye contact with? Michael folded the wax paper with military precision, creating a small, neat square before returning it to the paper bag. A proper tactical withdrawal demanded leaving no trace. I've got more books, Elijah offered, pulling a worn copy of Hatchet from his backpack. We could both read. If you want. The tactical implications were clear. Extended contact, regular interaction, established position. All security risks in Michael's volatile world. Same time tomorrow? He heard himself ask instead. Elijah's smile formed slowly, like sunrise breaking through cloud cover. Tactical victory secured. The cell phone video shook slightly as Melissa Chun stood 30 feet away, capturing the entire Confrontation. The homeless man's weathered face was briefly visible as he positioned himself between the child and the three bullies. This wasn't what she'd expected to see on her lunch break. 2 million views in less than 24 hours. The timestamp in the corner showed 3:47 p.m. as Michael's firm voice carried across the park. "That's enough. Walk away now." The largest bully's face registered shock, then they retreated. "Homeless hero defends child from bullies." The caption Melissa had added spread across social media platforms faster than anyone anticipated. Local Facebook groups, Twitter feeds, Instagram stories, all suddenly filled with the same 72-second clip. Comments poured in by the thousands. "Someone find this man and help him. That's what real courage looks like. Who is the kid? Is he okay?" Michael remained oblivious to his viral fame as he sat on his usual bench, carefully organizing the day's collected cans into the fraying backpack that contained everything he owned. The morning sun cast long shadows across the park as he methodically counted his potential refund. $4.35. Enough for a sandwich at the corner store if he skipped coffee. Channel 5 News van pulled into the parking lot adjacent to the park. Reporter Vanessa Williams adjusting her blazer as the cameraman tested light levels. "We're looking for a homeless man who intervened in a bullying incident right here in Jefferson Park," she explained to the maintenance worker emptying trash cans. "Apparently he stepped in when no one else would." Our top story tonight. The anchorman's polished voice carried across thousands of living rooms throughout the city. A homeless man's act of courage has captured the community's attention after a video showing him defending a young boy from bullies went viral yesterday afternoon. The clip played again, Michael's tall frame moving with unexpected grace for a man his age, his actions deliberate and controlled. Sarah Marshall's phone buzzed repeatedly with text messages as she rang up customers at the convenience store where she worked the evening shift. "Sarah, isn't that Elijah in this video? Check your Facebook." Her fingers trembled as she pulled up the link during her break, immediately recognizing her son's red backpack and blue jacket. The breath caught in her throat as she watched the scene unfold. The bully she'd never known about, the danger her son had been in, and the unexpected guardian who'd stepped forward. "Do you know him?" her manager asked, watching over her shoulder. "No," Sarah whispered, tears forming, "but I need to." Across town, Lieutenant Colonel James Weber paused his TV with the remote, leaning forward in disbelief. The homeless man's face, though weathered and partially hidden by an unkempt beard, struck him with immediate recognition. "That's Mike Wilson," he said to his wife. "We served together in Afghanistan, 3rd Battalion." He reached for his phone, fingers hovering over the keypad. "I thought he was dead." Michael remained unaware as his past and future collided in cyberspace. Veterans forums buzzed with speculation as former comrades began to recognize him. His service record appeared in comment sections: 2 tours, Bronze Star recipient, honorable discharge in 2011. The McDonald's, where Michael occasionally used the bathroom, now had customers asking the staff if they'd seen him. The librarian who sometimes allowed him to sit in the reading room during rainstorms found herself interviewed by the local newspaper. "He's always respectful, very quiet. Reads history books mostly. Do you think he knows he's famous now?" Elijah asked his mother as she tucked him into bed that night, the glow of her phone illuminating her tired face as she scrolled through hundreds of comments about the man who had protected her son. "I don't think so, baby," she replied, already planning her trip to the park tomorrow morning, "but he's about to find out." Michael slept beneath the highway overpass, jacket pulled tight against the evening chill, completely unaware that across the city, thousands of people were watching his moment of humanity, sharing his story and preparing to change his life forever. In his dreams, he was still a sergeant, still responsible for his men, still visible. Evening shadows stretched across Jefferson Park as Sarah Marshall clutched her phone, The viral video paused on the unmistakable image of her son and his unlikely defender. The afternoon shift had ended early when a coworker showed her the clip that had already reached 2 million views. "Homeless hero defends child from bullies," read the caption. But all Sarah could see was her Elijah, being pushed to the ground before a disheveled man intervened. The park's familiar pathways felt different now as she scanned the scattered benches and shaded areas, her nurse's shoes crunching against the gravel. Security lights flickered on as daylight faded, casting pools of yellow illumination across the green space where her son spent so many after-school hours alone. "Elijah," she called, spotting her son's blue backpack near the chess tables. The boy looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to something more complex, guilt mixed with defiance. "Mom, you're early." He stood, unconsciously positioning himself between her and the bearded man seated across from him. Michael's weathered hands froze mid-move above the chessboard, his military-trained instincts immediately assessing the newcomer as the boy's mother. Same eyes, similar stance. He began gathering his few possessions, preparing for the inevitable confrontation, the familiar accusations, the potential call to authorities. "You must be Michael," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. The homeless veteran's eyes darted up, surprise evident in his guarded expression. People rarely addressed him by name anymore. "Ma'am." He nodded once, military courtesy emerging automatically. His right hand unconsciously brushed at his stained jacket, a futile attempt at presentability that revealed more about his past than he realized. "I saw what you did for my son." Sarah moved closer, maintaining a respectful distance that acknowledged his space while closing the gap between them. "The video doesn't show everything, does it?" Elijah stepped forward. "Mom, those boys have been bothering me for weeks. Mr. Michael made them stop when nobody else would even notice." Michael's gaze dropped to the chessboard, uncomfortable with the recognition. "Anyone would have done the same, ma'am." "But they didn't," Sarah countered, her voice carrying the weight of a mother who just discovered her child had been suffering in silence. "Everyone walks past. Everyone looks away. You didn't." The park around them continued its evening transition. Dog walkers and joggers passing by, some slowing as they recognized the subjects of the viral video. Michael clocked each observer with the situational awareness of someone accustomed to constant vigilance. "How long have you been coming here to see my son?" Sarah asked, her tone careful, balanced between gratitude and parental concern. "Mom, I've been coming to see him," Elijah clarified, his small hand resting on the weathered chessboard. "Mister Michael taught me how to play. He was a champion in the Marines." Michael shifted, his discomfort with personal history evident. "Just battalion level, nothing special." Sarah studied the man before her, the disciplined posture at odds with his ragged appearance, the clear eyes despite the unkempt beard, the respectful distance he maintained while clearly protective of her son. "You're the reason he's been bringing extra sandwiches," she realized aloud, memories of depleted groceries and Elijah's vague excuses suddenly making sense. Michael's expression tightened. "I never asked him for anything, ma'am. Tried to refuse, but the kid's stubborn. Like his father was," Sarah said, her voice softening as she lowered herself onto the bench opposite them. "Army, 3rd Infantry Division. He never made it back from his second tour in Afghanistan." The connection hung in the air between them, unspoken understanding passing between two people who recognized the language of loss. Michael's posture changed slightly, a silent acknowledgement of shared ground. "Chess was his game too," she continued, gesturing toward the board. "He would have appreciated someone teaching Elijah." The boy looked between them, sensing the shift in energy. "Mr. Michael was going to show me how to castle today." Sarah reached into her bag, producing a carefully wrapped sandwich. "I brought dinner, enough for 3. She placed it on the table between them, a simple offering that carried weight beyond mere food. Michael hesitated, years of street-honed suspicion warring with something deeper. The pull of human connection he'd systematically severed since his own return from combat. "The video," he finally said, eyes meeting hers directly. "It's going to cause problems. People will come looking, ask questions." Sarah nodded, understanding. "The implications? They're already looking. The local news contacted the hospital when someone recognized my scrubs in the background." "I don't need that kind of attention," Michael said firmly, though he made no move to leave. "It complicates things." "Life's already complicated," Sarah responded, unwrapping the sandwich and dividing it precisely into thirds. "But sometimes, complications lead to something better." As streetlights strengthened against the deepening dusk, the unlikely trio continued their chess game. Spectators to their own viral moment, unaware that across town, a former staff sergeant was booking a flight home after recognizing the homeless hero as the man who'd once saved his life in Fallujah. Staff Sergeant Michael Wilson, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Bronze Star recipient for valor under fire in Kandahar Province. The words echo through the Channel 7 newsroom as reporter Diane Miller reads from military records, her voice carrying the weight of revelation. Michael's service photo fills the screen, a younger man in pressed uniform, eyes clear and focused, face unmarked by the years of hardship that would follow. The contrast between then and now hits viewers like a physical blow. Morning light filters through the window of Sarah's small apartment, where Elijah watches the news report, eyes wide with newfound understanding. The homeless man who defended him isn't just some random drifter. He's a hero, a warrior, someone who once stood among America's elite soldiers. "I served with Mike in Afghanistan back in 2012. Colonel James Harrigan states via video call, his military posture perfect even through the screen. "Finest non-commissioned officer I ever worked with. Tactical genius. Saved our entire unit during an ambush outside Kandahar. When he disappeared after medical discharge, many of us searched, but eventually had to accept he didn't want to be found." The report cuts to military footage. Rangers on patrol, Michael identifiable among them, directing his team with practiced precision through mountain terrain. The same calm authority he displayed confronting Elijah's bullies, only here in its original context. Across town, Michael sits under his usual tree, unaware of his sudden fame. A Veterans Affairs social worker approaches cautiously, clipboard in hand, not the first official to seek him out today. Word travels fast when a decorated combat veteran is found living on the streets. "We've been looking for you for 3 years, Sergeant Wilson," the woman explains, keeping a respectful distance. "Your benefits paperwork was never completed. Disability claims never processed." Michael's weathered face reveals nothing, eyes scanning for escape routes through the small crowd gathering nearby. Tactical assessment, old habits, people point, whisper. Some approach with coffee, food, awkward gratitude. His position has been compromised. Time to relocate. Dr. Marcus Chen watches the news report from his office at the Veterans Mental Health Center. He pauses the footage, studies the man's expressions, the subtle hypervigilance evident even in casual movement. Classic signs of untreated PTSD. He reaches for his phone, makes 3 calls in rapid succession. Colleagues, resources, a plan taking shape. The story builds momentum throughout the day. Military records reveal the rest. Wounded during his 2nd deployment. Traumatic brain injury. Honorable discharge. Prescribed medication he couldn't afford once his temporary benefits expired. Medical bills mounting. Marriage collapsing under the strain. Then, disappearance. By evening, Michael's full story saturates local media. Former Rangers share stories of his leadership, his tactical brilliance, his unwavering commitment to his men. Military forums light up with recognition. "That's Sarge. I thought he was dead. Someone help him, for God's sake. Sarah reads each article, watches each clip, the pieces falling into place. The way he positioned himself between Elijah and danger. The calm command presence. The tactical assessment before action. Not random instincts, but professional training at the highest level. Outside the park's public restroom, Michael splashes. Water on his face, studying his reflection in the scratched metal mirror. The man looking back bears little resemblance to the soldier in the news reports. Yet something has changed since yesterday. People see him now, really see him. Not through him. A text message alert sounds on Sarah's phone. The fundraiser organized by her co-workers has reached $5,000, then $10,000 as veterans groups share the link. The number keeps climbing. At the park entrance, 3 men in Ranger Regiment ball caps scan the area with military precision. Michael spots them immediately, former comrades. He recognizes their movement patterns, the way they divide the search grid. For a moment, he considers disappearing again. Tactical withdrawal. Then he sees Elijah approaching from the opposite direction, waving excitedly, holding a newspaper. The past he's been running from has finally caught up. And maybe, just maybe, that's not the worst thing that could happen. 15,000 shares, 27 news outlets, and 8 days after the video had first appeared online, Michael Wilson stood awkwardly in the lobby of the Veterans Outreach Center, his weathered hands clutching a manila folder containing paperwork he'd never imagined would bear his name again. Social Security card, VA benefits application, housing assistance forms, medical referrals. Each document a lifeline he'd long ago convinced himself he'd never grasp again. Your intake assessment is scheduled for 0900, Mr. Wilson, the receptionist informed him, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone who'd helped countless veterans navigate the system. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison will meet with you personally. Michael nodded, military instincts surfacing through years of street survival habits. His posture straightened unconsciously. Outside the center's glass doors, a Channel 7 news van idled, the reporter checking her makeup while the cameraman adjusted his equipment. They'd been following the homeless hero story relentlessly since the footage had gone viral. You don't have to talk to them, Sarah Marshall said quietly, appearing at his side with 2 cups of coffee. She'd taken a rare morning off from her second job to drive Michael to the appointment. They've gotten enough mileage out of your story already. Michael accepted the coffee, the warmth seeping into hands that had known nothing but cold for longer than he cared to remember. 3 days ago, he'd been sleeping under the Highway 16 overpass. Now people looked at him, saw him. It was more disorienting than the new clothes or the motel room the veterans group had arranged. Mr. Wilson? A tall man in pressed khakis and a polo shirt approached, hand extended. Rick Harrison, former Army, 101st Airborne. Can't tell you what an honor it is to meet you. Michael's handshake was automatic, muscle memory from another life responding. Honors misplaced, sir. I just stopped some kids from being stupid. Harrison's expression turned serious. 3 tours in Afghanistan, Silver Star recipient. And you think stopping those bullies was your first act of courage? We've got a different perspective on that. He gestured toward a conference room. Your paperwork's already been expedited. The mayor's office called yesterday. The conference room buzzed with activity as Michael entered. Representatives from 3 veterans organizations, a housing specialist, a mental health coordinator, and the director of a job placement program all turned to face him. On the wall, a whiteboard detailed what they'd titled Operation Second Chance. This is unnecessary, Michael muttered to Sarah, discomfort radiating through him. She touched his arm lightly. Elijah hasn't stopped talking about you since that day. The whole school knows what you did. His teacher started a donation drive. The housing specialist stepped forward, extending a key. Transitional apartment is ready, Mr. Wilson. 6 months covered while you get back on your feet. Address is in your folder. Michael stared at the key, not reaching for it. The last key he'd held had been to the apartment he'd lost 3 years ago, when the medical bills had finally overwhelmed him. "Take it," Sarah whispered, her voice firm but gentle. "Elijah's class made you a welcome basket. It's already there." The mental health coordinator approached next. "We've scheduled your first PTSD assessment for Thursday. The VS fast-tracked your case. Dr. Winters specializes in combat veterans." Michael's hands trembled slightly, coffee threatening to spill. The speed of it all. Too much. Too fast. Streets had rules. Predictability. This was chaos of a different sort. Harrison seemed to sense his overwhelm. "One step at a time, Sergeant. That's how we did it over there. That's how we do it here." Michael's phone buzzed, another new development, donated by the local cell provider after they'd learned of his story. A text from Elijah. "Did you get the apartment yet? Mom says I can help you move in." Before Michael could respond, the job placement coordinator stepped forward. "Eastside Academy is looking for a security and maintenance supervisor. The headmaster called specifically asking if you might be interested. It's where Elijah attends." Something shifted in Michael's expression, the mention of the boy cutting through his disorientation. The folder in his hand suddenly felt less like charity and more like purpose. "The fundraiser hit $27,000 this morning," Sarah said, showing him her phone screen. "People from 23 states have donated." Michael finally took the key, its weight substantial in his palm. "I don't know what to say, nothing to say," Harrison replied. "Just something to do, show up. Like you did for that kid in the park, one foot in front of the other." Outside the center's windows, more news vans had arrived. But beyond them, Michael spotted something more meaningful. Elijah's face pressed against the passenger window of his teacher's car. The boy waving excitedly. Visibility after years of invisibility. Recognition after years of being forgotten. Michael pocketed the key, squared his shoulders, and nodded once. "Ready when you are," he said. 3 months transform lives in ways years sometimes cannot. Michael stands before the mirror in his transitional housing apartment, adjusting the collar of his new uniform. The navy blue maintenance coveralls bare. The embroidered patch of Westside Elementary School. His fingers, once trembling from exposure and malnutrition, now move with steady purpose. The face staring back at him has changed, clean-shaven, hair trimmed properly, eyes clear for the first time in years. "First day jitters?" Sarah asks from the doorway, holding a travel mug of coffee. She started bringing it every morning before her shift at the hospital, where she's recently been promoted to shift supervisor. The fundraiser her co-workers organized had done more than just raise money for Michael. It had shown Sarah that she wasn't alone in her struggles. Michael accepts the coffee with a nod. "Been a while since I had somewhere to be." His voice, once raspy from disuse, has regained some of its former military precision. "Not sure I remember how to be around people all day." Through the window, morning sunlight bathes the modest apartment, complex in golden hues. The veterans' transitional housing isn't luxurious, but it's clean, safe, and most importantly, his. 3 small rooms with working heat, a shower, and a door that locks. After years on the streets, it still feels unreal. "Elijah's waiting downstairs," Sarah says, checking her watch. "He insisted on being early for your first day together." Michael's therapy session notes lie on the table. Twice weekly with Dr. Kaminsky at the VIA PTS. Doesn't disappear in 3 months, but having structure helps. Having purpose helps more. The maintenance position at Westside Elementary came with specific accommodations, quiet work areas when needed, flexible scheduling around therapy appointments, and a supervisor who served in the same battalion 2 decades earlier. Downstairs, Elijah bounces on his heels, backpack neatly arranged. wearing a new winter coat provided by the Veterans Outreach Program that adopted his classroom. The boy's face lights up when Michael appears. No longer the scared, hunched child from the park, Elijah stands taller now. "Mr. Mike, we're gonna be late." His excitement barely contained as he checks his watch. A gift from Michael's former unit members who reached out after the news coverage. Michael falls into step beside him, his gait still showing hints of military bearing. The path to the school takes them through Jefferson Park, the same place where everything changed that autumn afternoon. The bench where Michael once stored his few possessions now bears a small, unobtrusive plaque. "Kindness Matters." The local business association installed it without fanfare. "Think those boys will be there today?" Elijah asks, his voice quieter now. Michael glances down. The principal mentioned they're still on suspended attendance. Separate classrooms when they return next week. The bullying awareness program implemented after the incident has transformed school policies. Michael's scheduled to share his perspective on intervention next month. From someone who once felt invisible to someone now explicitly visible, deliberately. Seen. 3 blocks from the school, they pass Mrs. Hernandez sweeping her storefront. Once, she would have hurried inside at Michael's approach. Today, she waves. "Beautiful morning, Mr. Wilson. Ready for the big day?" Recognition still feels foreign to Michael. For years, the goal was to remain unseen, unnoticed. Now faces greet him by name. The transition from invisible to community member remains the hardest part of his recovery. "Did you take your morning meds?" Elijah asks with the directness only children possess, pointing to Michael's pocket where the orange prescription bottle makes a slight bulge. "Roger that," Michael responds with the hint of a smile. 0700 hours, as ordered. Their daily check-ins had become routine. Elijah reminding Michael about medications, Michael ensuring Elijah completed his reading assignments. Accountability flowing both ways, creating stability neither had known before. The school's red brick building comes into view, an American flag snapping in the morning breeze. Principal Garcia waits at the entrance, clipboard in hand. She'd taken a chance hiring Michael, navigating bureaucratic hurdles and skeptical board members. The maintenance position had been vacant for months. Finding someone willing to work for school district wages wasn't easy. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson. Right on time." She extends her hand, her grip firm and respectful. Elijah, Mrs. Reynolds, is waiting in the library with those new science books you requested. The boy hesitates, looking up at Michael with unexpected concern. "You'll be okay?" Michael nods, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Go ahead, son. I'll see you at lunch period." As Elijah disappears inside, Michael follows Principal Garcia toward the maintenance office. Students stream past, some staring curiously at the new staff member. A few recognize him from the viral video. He hears their whispers, but they no longer trigger his anxiety as severely. "We're grateful to have you," Garcia says, unlocking the maintenance room. "Not just for the work, but for what you represent to our students. Actions over circumstances. Courage despite fear." Michael steps into the small office, setting down his coffee. Tools line the wall, organized, labeled, purposeful. A work order clipboard hangs by the door, problems to solve. Things to fix, a reason to wake up tomorrow. "Just doing my job," he responds, the phrase carrying echoes of his military days. Outside the window, he watches Elijah racing up the library steps, no longer looking over his shoulder for threats. The boy turns briefly, catches Michael's eye, and waves with unrestrained enthusiasm. Some things break beyond repair. Others just need the right tools and patient hands. Michael picks up the clipboard and reads the first work order of the day.